Today we're going to go over the Unit 7 Study Guide Part 1, which is what you're going to see on like the vocabulary part of the exam. So number 1 wants to know, when there are more than 2 alleles, what type of inheritance pattern is it? And that's called multiple alleles. So remember, an example of that would be blood type, because you can have an A allele, a B allele, or an O allele. Number 2 wants to know what type of inheritance pattern it is when the traits are controlled by 2 or more genes. And those are polygenic inheritance patterns. So you'd see polygenic inheritance with traits that have more than one gene, so like skin color or hair color or eye color and some of those other types of traits. Number 3, if you have a gene that gives you 2 traits that are fully expressed, like in this example with black feathers and white feathers producing a checker chicken, that's a codominant trait. So remember, when codominance happens, there are traits that are fully expressed even if the individual is heterozygous. Number 4, when you get an intermediate color, such as when a red gene and a white gene produce a pink flower in an organism, that's incomplete dominance because there is not a trait that can fully hide the other trait. Number 5, when homologous chromosomes don't separate properly in meiosis, this is referred to as non-disjunction, and this can cause disorders such as Down syndrome or trisomy X or Edwards syndrome. Number 6, the 23rd pair of chromosomes is referred to the sex chromosomes, and the 2 possible sex chromosomes are X and Y. And number 7, the first 22 pairs of chromosomes are referred to as autosomes. So most of our genes are carried on autosomes, which are not sex chromosomes. Number 8, the different variations of a gene are referred to as alleles. And so those are what can give us variation within a trait. Number 9, the expression or appearance of a gene is its phenotype. So what something looks like is phenotype. The letters that code for the phenotype are the genotype. Number 10, a trait located on the X chromosome. These are referred to as X-linked traits or sex-linked traits, and it's because they are carried on one of the sex chromosomes. Number 11, if you have a trait that is always expressed and has the ability to hide the other allele, this is a dominant trait. The opposite of that is a trait that can be hidden and only show up when you have 2 copies of the same allele, and that's number 12. Those are recessive traits. So remember, recessive traits can be hidden by dominant traits, and they're only visible as a phenotype if the recessive trait has 2 copies of the same allele. Number 13, the father of modern genetics is Gregor Mendel. And number 14, that box we've been using to predict the outcome of genetic crosses is a Punnett square. In number 15, we're looking for the specific alleles of an organism that give it its traits, and that is genotype, right? So remember, genotype is the genetic code that gives us phenotype, which is what something looks like. Number 16, the study of traits and how they are passed is the study of genetics. And number 17, a picture that shows how traits are passed on through multiple generations is a pedigree. Next, we'll move on to review some of the different diseases that are genetic, so that means they are passed down through families. So number 18 says that a person with blank is missing the enzyme to break down phenylalanine and can cause cognitive impairment. So that is PKU, or phenylketonuria, and that is a disease caused by genetics, but it can be controlled by diet. Number 19, blank is caused by a dominant allele. And of these 5 diseases, that is Huntington's disease. The other 4 are all recessive. Number 20, a person with blank has abnormally shaped red blood cells that can block circulation and damage organs. And that is sickle cell anemia. So when the hemoglobin protein is shaped incorrectly, it changes the shape of red blood cells, and that can cause organ damage because the red blood cells don't flow through blood vessels like they're supposed to. Number 21, blank results in thick mucus buildup in the lungs and digestive organs, and that is cystic fibrosis. Number 22, The symptoms of Huntington's disease appear between the ages of 30 and 50. So Huntington's disease is a disease where people often don't know they have it if they don't know that it runs in their family until they are starting to be in middle age. Number 23, a person with blank usually dies by about the age of 5, and that is Tay-Sachs disease. This is a disease that affects very young children. Usually you start to see symptoms between 6 months and a year old. Number 24, a person with blank lacks an enzyme that breaks down a nervous system lipid. That's also Tay-Sachs disease. This disease affects children's nervous systems and it progresses quite rapidly, which is why they die at a very young age. Number 25, blank can be controlled with diet, and that is PKU or phenylketonuria. So people who have this disease need to eat a diet that does not contain phenylalanine, and that allows them to reduce the chances that they will suffer cognitive effects. Now we're going to look at several questions about the pedigree that's at the top of this page. So first we need to determine if this is a recessive or a dominant pedigree. And if you'll notice, there are some individuals who are shaded who carry this trait, but notice that the trait is not in every single generation. The very first generation, generation 1, does not have any individuals who show the trait. So what that tells us is that this trait is probably recessive. Now we can go on to answer the rest of the questions. So number 27 says that generation 1 has a father and a mother. How many offspring do they have? So if you remember, offspring are indicated by these vertical lines. So these parents have 3 offspring. Number 28, how many generations are shown on this pedigree? So here you'll notice that there is 1, 2, 3 generations indicated by the Roman numerals. So there's 3 generations. Number 29, how many males are shown on this pedigree? If you recall, males are indicated by a square on a pedigree. And so when you count the males or the number of squares on this pedigree, you should see that there are 4. Number 30 says how many females are shown on this pedigree. And if you remember, females are shown by a circle. So in this pedigree, there are 5. And 31 says, using the letters capital T and small t, write down the genotype of the square in generation 1. So we're looking at the square that's here. Notice that he does have a child who shows the recessive trait. That means that he has to be heterozygous, so his genotype would be big T, small t. Now we're going to answer questions 32 through 36 with a new pedigree. So number 32 says, what inheritance pattern is shown in the pedigree? And so if you'll notice, this one's a little bit different. If we review what symbols mean quickly, we have an affected male is a square that's shaded in. An unaffected male is unshaded. If there was an affected female, she would be fully shaded in. Unaffected females are empty circles, and carrier females have a dot in the center. And so because there are females that can be carriers, but there are no males that can be carriers, there's a really good chance that this is a sex-linked or X-linked trait. Number 33 says how many generations are in the pedigree. So if you remember, the generations are indicated by the Roman numerals on the side of the pedigree, and this pedigree goes all the way to the symbol V, which means 5. So there are 5 generations in this pedigree. The next question, number 34, says how many females are carriers in this pedigree? And remember, carriers are circles with a dot in the middle. So where you're looking for symbols that look like that, and you should count 8 carriers. Number 35 says how many males show the affected trait. So now we're looking for males that are shaded in. So we're looking for boxes that look like that. So if you see here, there's several. And if you count them all up, again, you should find 8. The last question says how many offspring are in generation 2 of this pedigree. And remember, offspring are indicated by a vertical line dropping down from the parents. So here we have only 1 offspring because the other person in generation 2 is a spouse or an in-law. And so there is 1 offspring from that generation 2. The last 4 questions are going to be about the final pedigree here. And so first we have to determine with number 37 what inheritance pattern is shown. And so if you'll notice, there are 3 generations, 1, 2, 3, and every single generation shows at least one individual that is showing the trait. So that's a pretty good indicator that this is a dominant trait. Since we know this is probably dominant, all of the individuals who show the trait will be shaded in. And so if it's dominant, their genotypes can either be, in this example, we'll use the letter T, capital T, or they could be heterozygous with big T, small t. So number 38 says, using letters big T and small t, what is the genotype of individual 1, 2? So the genotype we're looking for is this person's genotype. We know that they show the dominant trait. We are able to determine their genotype by looking at their offspring. So notice that they have a daughter who shows the trait, a son who shows the trait, and a daughter who does not show the trait. Because they have daughter, who's number 22, who does not show this trait, that means that both parents are able to pass on a recessive allele, and that means that person 1, 2 has a heterozygous genotype, so it's big T, small t. Number 39, how many offspring do 2, 3 and 2, 4 have? And so when you look, we'll find 2, 3 and 2, 4 first, so that's this individual and this individual. And we notice we've got 2 vertical lines dropping down from those parents, which means they have 2 children. Number 40, how many females show the affected trait in this pedigree? And so we're just going to count how many females are shaded in. So you're looking for circles that are shaded in. And what you should notice is that you have 1 in generation 1, 1 in generation 2, and 1 in generation 3. And that gives us a total of 3 females that show the trait in this pedigree.